I was standing in my laundry room folding a pile of clean towels when my phone rang. Unknown number. Local area code. I almost let it go. I almost just let it ring and go back to my towels and my Tuesday night. But something made me pick up. Something I still can't explain. The man on the other end said, "Is this Claire Renner?" "I'm calling regarding the estate of Patricia Renner." I put my hand on the dryer to steady myself. Because my mother's name is Patricia Renner. And my mother has been dead for 3 years. I said, "I'm sorry, what did you say?" He repeated it. Same words. Calm voice. Like this was a normal Tuesday for him. And I just stood there in my laundry room with a clean towel in my hand, completely unable to move. Because that sentence made no sense. The estate was closed. Everything was settled. I signed the papers. I watched it all get finalized. And yet here was a man I'd never heard of, calling me on a random Tuesday night, saying my dead mother's name like he had unfinished business with her. The worst part is, somewhere under the confusion, I felt something shift. Like a lock turning. Like some quiet part of me had been waiting for exactly this call without knowing it. Okay. Let me back up. My mom, Patricia, but honestly nobody called her that except telemarketers and her doctor's office. She passed away 3.5 years ago. Ovarian cancer. It was fast. 8 months from the first diagnosis to the very end, and I know people say that sometimes, that it moved fast, but I mean it moved fast. 1 month she was complaining about back pain and bloating and thinking it was just stress. 2 months later she was starting her second round of chemo. 4 months after that, we were talking to hospice. There is no version of that timeline that gives you enough time to adjust. There is no version where you get to be ready. There were 2 of us kids. Me and my older sister Dana. Dana is 4 years older than me, she just turned 46. She's the kind of woman who color-codes her calendar and has never missed a credit card payment in her life. Organized, structured, sharp. She married young, bought a house at 28, had her whole life mapped out in a way that always kind of amazed me. I'm the other kind. I rented apartments and changed careers and went through phases and called mom every single day just to talk about whatever was in my head. That was our thing. 45-minute phone calls about nothing, about a weird customer at the coffee shop, about a show we were both watching, about a memory that had just randomly floated up out of nowhere. We could fill an hour with pure nothing and it still felt like the most important conversation I'd had all week. Dana and I were never close the way Mom and I were close. We weren't enemies. It wasn't cold. We showed up for holidays and birthdays and we texted when something big happened. But we moved in different orbits, always had. She was the responsible one. I was the other one. When Mom got sick, Dana stepped up in a way I genuinely respected. She moved back close to home. She took over the logistics, the insurance calls, the prescription management, the appointment scheduling. She was sleeping in our childhood home's guest room some weeks, just to be close. I was 2 hours away and I drove back every single weekend, every single one, but I couldn't be there day to day the way Dana was. And I was grateful. I told her that constantly. I told her she was doing an incredible thing. When Mom passed, Dana was named executor of the estate. That was in the existing will, a document Mom had written years earlier, when we were both still in our 20s. It divided everything 50-50 between the two of us. The house, a savings account, a modest investment portfolio. Not life-changing money, but not nothing either. It was the accumulated quiet work of a woman who had lived carefully her whole life so her daughters would be okay after she was gone. Dana handled all of it. Filed the paperwork, managed the accounts, sent me things to sign. I signed everything she sent me. I didn't read through every document the way I probably should have. I trusted her completely, because she was my sister, because we were both in the middle of grief, because I had absolutely no reason not to. I know how that sounds now. There was one thing that nagged at me during those weeks after Mom died, when we were going through her belongings. Every time I drifted toward the old roll-top desk in Mom's bedroom, the one she'd had since before I was born, where she kept her important papers and her address book and her little box of sentimental things, Dana would redirect me. Smoothly, naturally, the way she did everything. Oh, I already sorted through that. It's mostly just old bills and receipts, nothing important. Why don't you go through her closet? She had some jewelry in there she definitely wanted you to have. And I let it go. I let her steer me away every time. I told myself she was just being efficient. Taking care of things so I didn't have to. I didn't think about that desk again for 3 years. The man on the phone was Robert Calloway, an attorney with a small firm about 40 minutes from where I grew up. He said he'd been trying to reach me for some time. He'd had an old address and an outdated phone number on file, and tracking down my current contact information had taken longer than he expected. He said my mother had retained his firm privately, approximately 6 months before she passed. She had asked them to draw up a new will and to hold it under very specific conditions. I said, I don't understand. The estate has already been settled. Everything was finalized almost 3 years ago. He said, yes, I know. This document wouldn't affect the broader estate. But there were specific assets your mother wanted handled separately. And she left instructions that we were not to reach out until 3 years after her passing. I asked him why 3 years. He said he didn't know. She hadn't explained her reasoning. She'd simply been very clear about the timing, and he'd honored it. I said I'd come in. I sat down on the laundry room floor after I hung up. Just sat down right there on the tiles with the clean towels next to me. I stayed there for a while. My mind kept trying to build an explanation that made sense. Maybe it was a piece of jewelry she'd forgotten to include. Maybe it was a savings bond, one of those old ones that take years to mature. Maybe she'd set money aside for a grandchild she hoped I'd eventually have. People did things like that. Sentimental things. That was the kind of woman she was. But then I kept coming back to one phrase he'd used. She'd been very specific about the conditions. My mother was not a secretive person. She was the opposite of secretive. She was the woman who left voicemails that ran 7 minutes long. She told you how she felt. She told you what she was thinking. She did not do quiet things in the background without mentioning them. She did not drive herself across town in the middle of cancer treatment, alone, without telling either of her daughters, and engage a lawyer in secret. Unless she had a reason to. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed and I ran through every possible version of what this could mean, and I kept landing somewhere that made my chest tight. I got to the office the next morning at 9. It was a small, older firm. Wood paneling. A receptionist who offered me coffee. Mr. Calloway was probably in his late 60s, unhurried, precise, the kind of person who chose his words carefully and meant all of them. He walked me through the basics first. The will was legitimate. Signed, notarized, properly witnessed, filed correctly. It had been sitting in his safe for 3 years exactly as my mother instructed. And then he told me when it had been signed. 6 months before she died. Which placed it right in the middle of her treatment. Right in the period when she was exhausted, when she was losing weight, when some days getting out of bed was the whole accomplishment. That was when she had put on real clothes, gotten in her car, and driven 40 minutes to a law office she had found entirely on her own. Without saying a word to me. Without saying a word to Dana. He slid a sealed envelope across the table. And next to it, a small key on a paper tag with a bank name and a box number written in ink. He said my mother had asked that both items be given to me directly. Not to the estate. Not jointly. To me, and only to me, in person. I picked them up. I held them in my lap for the rest of the meeting. I didn't open anything. I wasn't ready. Something told me I needed to be alone when I did. On the drive home I called Dana. I kept my voice steady. I told her the basics, that a lawyer had contacted me, that Mom had filed a second will in secret about 6 months before she died, that he'd been holding it per her instructions and had only just now reached out. Dana didn't say anything for a moment. And I know my sister. I know the difference between her I'm surprised silence and her other silences. This was not the silence of someone hearing unexpected news. This was the silence of someone deciding what angle to take. Then she said, "That's really strange. Are you sure this firm is legitimate? Do you have any way to verify who they are?" I gave her the name. She said she'd never heard of them. She said it sounded like it could be some kind of scam targeting grieving families. She said to be very careful before I signed anything or gave anyone any information. I said the lawyer had already provided documentation and the will bore Mom's signature, which I recognized. Another pause. Then, what does the will actually say? I told her I hadn't been through all of it yet. That he'd asked for both of us to come in for a formal reading. She said, "I'll have to check my schedule." I actually moved the phone away from my face for a second. Just to breathe. Our mother, who was dead, who had secretly rewritten her will while undergoing chemotherapy, had apparently left something important enough to warrant a formal meeting 3 years later. and Dana needed to check her schedule. The meeting was set for Thursday. Wednesday night, Dana texted me. Work conflict. She'd try to call in if she could. She was sorry, she'd make it up to me, she just couldn't get away. She never called in. So I sat in that conference room alone. Just me and Mr. Calloway and his associate, a younger woman who took notes and said nothing. And he walked me through it. The new will dealt specifically with the family home. The house we grew up in, the house that had already been split 50-50 between Dana and me in the original will. In this document, my mother had changed that. She left the house entirely to me. Dana's share, gone. Not reduced. Not adjusted. Removed entirely. I read that paragraph probably 4 times. I kept thinking I was misreading something. That there was a clause I was missing, a condition that would explain it away. But there wasn't. It was plain and direct. And then I got to the specific language my mother had added herself, because no lawyer on earth writes this way, and I knew her voice the second I saw it on the page. It said, Dana Michelle Renner is being intentionally excluded from any interest in the above-described property, for reasons she is already aware of. For reasons she is already aware of. I looked up at Mr. Calloway. He was watching me with that same careful, unhurried expression. He had definitely done this before. Sat across from someone while they read something that rearranged their world. He waited. I said, "Did she tell you anything? About what she meant by that?" He said, "No." She was very private about her reasons. She said only that it was necessary. He reminded me about the envelope and the key. I thanked him. I shook his hand. I walked to my car. I sat in the parking lot for probably 20 minutes before I could make myself drive. I called Dana that night. I told her what the will said. I told her about the house. I told her about the line, about being excluded for reasons she was already aware of. Dead silence. Not confusion. Not hurt. Not even anger. Just silence, and then, she wasn't in her right mind at that point. She was on a heavy medication regimen. We should be able to contest this. She went straight to contest. No hesitation. No, what does that mean, or why would she write that, or any of the questions a normal person asks when they hear something like that for the first time. She went straight to the legal strategy. I said, "Dana, why would Mom write that you're excluded for reasons you already know?" She said people say things when they're frightened and sick. She said Mom had been under enormous stress. She said this didn't reflect who Mom really was or what she really wanted. I said, "Did something happen between you two that I don't know about?" She said, "Of course not." She asked about the envelope. I told her Mom had left me a letter and a key to a safe deposit box. She asked what was in the letter. I said I hadn't opened it. She told me not to open it alone. She said I should wait until we could sit down together, maybe have a lawyer present, make sure I was in the right headspace. I said okay. I said good night. I hung up. And I opened it the moment I sat down on my couch. 4 pages. Both sides. My mother's handwriting, not the fragile, unsteady version from her last weeks, but the firm, confident script from earlier in her illness, maybe 7 or 8 months before she died. The pen pressed hard into the paper, the way it always. I'm not going to share every word. Some of it was between me and her, and I'm keeping it that way. But the center of it, the thing that made my hands start shaking, was this. About a year before she died, around the time her symptoms first started, Mom had noticed something wrong with her finances. Discrepancies. Small ones at first, amounts that didn't quite match, transactions she didn't recognize. She thought she was confused, that she'd forgotten something. She double-checked. And then she started tracking it. Over the following months, she built a picture. Money had been leaving her accounts, the checking account and the investment portfolio, in careful increments. Never one large withdrawal that would trip an alert. Small amounts, spread out, spaced just far enough apart to fly under the radar. But consistent. And adding up, over the span of roughly 2 years, to a number that took my breath away. Tens of thousands of dollars. Gone. Mom wrote that she'd sat with the evidence for weeks before she let herself believe what it meant. She wrote, I kept finding ways to explain it. A mistake somewhere. An error. I told myself I was missing something. I went through it again and again hoping to find the thing that made it make sense. There was no other explanation. She wrote, I know who did this. I have known for a long time. And I have not said anything because I did not know how to say it without burning down everything that was left. She didn't name Dana directly in that paragraph. She didn't have to. She explained why she hadn't gone to the police. She wrote that she thought about it. She thought about it seriously. But she was dying, and her daughters were going to have to live in the world together after she was gone, and she couldn't bear the thought of what a prosecution would do to what was left of the family. So she did what she could. She protected the house. She documented everything. And she wrote me this letter. She wrote, I am not asking you to do anything with this, Claire. I am only asking you to know the truth. You deserve to know. And maybe someday you'll decide what to do with it. But that is your choice to make, not mine. I put the letter down. I walked around my apartment. I drank some water. I sat on my bathroom floor in the dark for a while. Then I went back and read the rest. The next morning, I drove to the bank. The safe deposit box was in my name. Mom had added me years ago, when I was in my 20s, for some reason I'd never questioned. The woman at the bank led me to a small private room and left me alone with it. Inside was a folder. Bank statements. 2.5 years' worth, printed and organized in chronological order with a paper clip on each month. And alongside them, in Mom's handwriting, a log. Page after page. Dates, amounts, account numbers. Her own notes in the margins. Abbreviations I didn't fully understand. She had tracked every single transaction by hand. She had built this entire case herself, quietly, alone, while she was going to chemo. I thought about that. I sat there and I really let myself think about that. My mother, sitting at her kitchen table after a treatment day when she was exhausted and nauseous and scared, pulling out her bank statements and her notepad and just working. Methodically. Like it was important. Because it was important. At the bottom of the folder, under all the statements and the log, there was one more thing. A printout. Someone had taken a screenshot of a text message conversation and printed it on plain paper. I don't know who sent it to Mom. I don't know how she got it. She didn't explain it in the letter. But it was a text exchange between Dana and a name I didn't recognize. And in the conversation they were discussing timing. Amounts. They were discussing how to space things out so that no automatic alerts would be triggered. They were talking about it like it was a project. Like it was logistics. At one point Dana had written, "We just have to be careful for a few more months and then it won't matter." We. Not I. We. Someone else was in this with her. I sat in that small private room for a very long time. The bank employee knocked once to check on me and I said I was fine. I wasn't fine. But I stayed until I'd read every single page. Until I'd held all of it. Then I put it back in the folder, and I drove home, and I tried to figure out what I was supposed to do with the rest of my life. Everything shifted. Every single memory from that year just rearranged itself into something different. Something I didn't recognize. I thought about Dana moving close to home right when the diagnosis came through. How quickly she'd offered to take over everything, the appointments, the paperwork, the finances. How I had been so relieved. How I had thanked her, over and over, for being so on top of everything. How I had thought to myself, this is what family does. This is who Dana is when it counts. She had probably been waiting for that call for 3 years, wondering if it would ever come, hoping that maybe the firm had lost the paperwork, hoping that maybe it would just disappear. And while she was managing the estate, while she was the executor, while she was the one controlling all the documents and all the information and all the decisions, she'd known the whole time. My mother had known too. She had known, and she had kept showing up to Sunday dinners anyway. She had let Dana make her doctor's appointments and drive her to treatments. She had kept the surface smooth because she didn't want to spend what was left of her time burning everything down. She had protected the peace, even when the peace was a lie, because she loved both of her daughters and she didn't know how to stop. And at the same time, quietly, carefully, she had been building this folder. She had been writing this letter. She had been doing everything in her power to make sure that when she was gone, I would be okay. That I would have the truth, even if she couldn't hand it to me herself. She had done all of that while she was dying. While she was running out of time, she had spent some of what was left making sure I would be protected. I picked up her letter again. I read the last paragraph for the 4th time. She had written, "I'm sorry I never said any of this to your face, Claire. I'm sorry I couldn't find the words while I was still here to say them. I kept telling myself there would be a right moment, and then there wasn't. But I need you to know that none of this was ever your fault. You gave me nothing but goodness. Don't let this take that away from you. I sat on my couch and I let go of something I had been holding for a very long time. And then I cried in a way I hadn't cried since the funeral. I didn't call her. I drove to her house. Sunday morning, early enough that the dew was still on her front lawn. Her car was in the driveway. Her husband's car was gone. I knew he played golf on Sundays. I had timed it that way without letting myself fully admit that's what I was doing. She answered the door herself. She was in a cardigan and had a mug in her hand. And the moment she saw my face, the exact moment, I watched something change in her expression. Just a flicker. A tightening around the eyes. Like a door closing behind them. She knew. She stepped back and let me in without saying anything. I walked past her into the kitchen. I set the folder on the counter. I put the bank statements down, and then the log in Mom's handwriting, and then the printed screenshot on top of everything. I didn't look at her. I looked at the papers. I said, "How long?" She didn't answer right away. I heard her set her mug down. I said, "How long, Dana?" She said, "Claire." I said, "Just answer the question." She came to stand on the other side of the counter. She looked at the papers but she didn't touch them. She crossed her arms. She said, "I was going to pay it back. That was always the plan. It was supposed to be temporary. I just needed to stabilize things, and then I was going to put it all back before she ever knew." I said, "She knew. She knew for at least a year before she died. She figured it out herself, in the middle of chemotherapy, and she tracked every single transaction by hand, and she never said a word to you about it. Did you know that she knew?" Dana said nothing. I said, "Did you know?" She said, "After she died. I found some things. In the desk. Some of her notes. I figured out she'd probably put it together." I said, "So when you were sending me documents to sign, when you were executing the estate, you knew that she had likely discovered everything. You knew why she might have changed her will. And you managed the whole estate anyway." She said, "I didn't touch what she changed. Whatever the house situation was, I let it stand. I didn't try to reverse anything." I said, "You let it stand because reversing it would have meant explaining why it was changed in the first place." She didn't deny it. I picked up the screenshot. I held it up. I said, "Who is we?" Her jaw tightened. She looked away toward the window. I said, "Dana." "Who else was involved?" A long pause. The refrigerator hummed. A dog barked somewhere outside. She said, "Marcus. Her husband's younger brother." She said, "He was in serious trouble. The kind of trouble that doesn't stay trouble, it becomes dangerous." I was scared. I didn't know what else to do. I thought if I could just get him enough to get clear of the situation, I could pay it back quietly and no one would have to know. I thought I could handle it. I said, "You thought you could steal from our sick mother and handle it?" She said, "That's not what I thought I was doing." I said, "Then what did you think you were doing?" She didn't answer. I said, "She was scared too, Dana. She was scared every single day that year. She was scared about dying and she was scared about what she'd found out, and instead of confronting you, instead of falling apart, she just sat there and documented everything in case I needed it someday. That's what she spent some of her last good days doing. Making sure I would be okay after she was gone." Dana said, "I loved her. I need you to know that. What I did, it wasn't because I didn't love her." I said, "I know you loved her." I meant it. That was the most painful part. It wasn't that I thought Dana was a monster. It wasn't that simple. She had loved Mom and she had stolen from her, and both of those things were true and they didn't cancel each other out. They just existed together and they were both real. I said, "What do you want from me right now? What are you actually asking me to do with all of this?" She looked at me for the first time since I'd walked in. Really looked at me. She said, "I want you to let it go. For us. For whatever is left of us. I want you to decide that this family is worth more than this." I stood there. She said, "She wouldn't have wanted this to be how it ends." I said, "I know what she would have wanted. I have 4 pages of it in her handwriting." I picked up the folder. I gathered the papers. I put everything back in my bag. I walked to the front door. She called my name from the kitchen. I stopped. I didn't turn around. She said, "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. But I am. I'm genuinely sorry." I stood there for a second with my hand on the door. Then I walked out. I met with an attorney the following week. One I found myself, completely independent of anyone in the family, someone who had no connection to any of us. She laid out the options clearly and without drama. Financial elder abuse is a recognized legal issue in many states. Some of what Dana did might be actionable. Some of it might fall outside the statute of limitations given the timeline. She told me to take my time. She told me this was not a decision I needed to make in the next 30 days, or even the next 6 months. She asked me what outcome I was hoping for. I didn't know how to answer that. I still don't, fully. I don't think I want to send Dana to prison. But I also don't know if what I feel is forgiveness. It's something murkier than that. Less resolved. More like standing in a room where someone moved all the furniture and you keep reaching for things in the wrong places. I kept the house. The will held. Mr. Calloway had done everything correctly and there were no legitimate grounds for Dana to contest it. She has not tried. I haven't moved in yet. I've been there a few times to sort through what's left of Mom's things. It still feels like her house. It still smells faintly like her hand lotion and the candles she kept on the kitchen windowsill. I stand in the living room sometimes and I don't know what to do with my hands. Dana and I haven't spoken since that Sunday. Her husband texted me about a month after to ask if there was any chance we could all sit down together as a family and find a way through this. I read the text 3 times. I still haven't replied. Not because I've made a decision. Because I don't know what to say yet. Then, about 2 weeks after the meeting with my attorney, on an ordinary evening when I was reading through Mom's letter again, I noticed something I'd missed before. At the very bottom of the last page, written smaller than the rest of the text, almost like a postscript she'd added after the fact, there was a name I didn't recognize. A woman's name. And a phone number with an out-of-state area code. No explanation. Just the name and the number. I stared at it for 2 days before I called. The woman who answered sounded surprised. Her name was Lorraine. She'd grown up with my mother before either of them had kids, back in a small town neither of them had stayed in. They'd lost touch for decades and reconnected a few years before Mom got sick. She said they'd started meeting up quietly for lunch every few weeks, starting about a year before Mom passed. She said, "Patty never told you, because she didn't want you to worry. She thought if you knew she was struggling emotionally, you'd carry it on top of everything else you were already carrying." She said my mother had talked about me constantly. Every single time they saw each other. She told her things I'd said, things I'd done, things that made her laugh. She was so proud of me, Lorraine said. In a way that was quiet but absolute. And then she said the thing that I didn't know I needed to hear until she said it. She said, she was not alone, sweetheart. The last year of her life, she had people around her. She had me. She had a few others. She let herself be loved, even when she couldn't say everything out loud. I want you to know she was okay. She really was. I thanked her. My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store and I held the phone long after the call ended. And something that had been locked in my chest since I read that letter finally, slowly, came loose. My mother spent the last year of her life quietly building something she hoped I would never have to use, and making sure I wouldn't be alone if I did. She knew she was leaving me in a complicated world, and she did every single thing she could think of to make sure I had the truth, and the house, and enough love stored up to find my way through it. I think about that every time I drive past that house. And I think I'm going to be okay.